How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, another startling case, this time coming out our way from Connecticut. It's the starvation and silence of Jacqueline Torres-Garcia, known as Mimi. Guys, if you looked at the video I did yesterday, I did a video of a young girl by the name of Melody Buzzard. Right now, we don't know where she is. I believe Dyfus may have went to her house today, to the mom's house, to try to figure out, where's your daughter? We want some answers. She's been missing for quite some time. And we noticed as we covered the show that there were concerns with always going to be child protective services at some level, you know, something that has to be revamped probably, or some type of oversight that has to be put in play. And then you also have homeschooling is coming up now a lot. You know, what is the oversight when it comes to parents who have their children homeschooled? And you're going to find that with today's case. If you want to know a little bit more about Melody Buzzard, please check out the video I did yesterday. And there's even information, if you do know her whereabouts or have information at the end of the video, you'll go ahead and be able to get the information you need to report something. So what I would like to do is I have the details of the case right here. I got some concerns. I got everything scripted. But I would like to show you two videos. One video is about 10 minutes. It's going to kind of give you a timeline of this case. I got some updates. I'm pretty up to date with everything. And then the other video is going to talk about DCF's involvement in this case, or in other words, Child Protective Services. So I would like to show you these videos first to kind of give you understanding of what's going on in the case. So this first video, again, just a timeline. It's gonna start back, I think, early October and work its way closer to today. And then the next video will be the most recent. It's a day old. And then I got all the updates to keep you updated and current. But there's definitely a chance to create an impact here because we need new laws for certain areas of what we're looking at for maybe some type of oversight with Child Protective Services. So I think they're revisiting that, but also homeschooling. And guys, I didn't get a chance. Let me show you this beautiful girl. Here she is. She was 11. And the three on the right, they're the ones that's being charged. Well, two are being charged for the murder. One knew and didn't do nothing about it. So on the top is her mom, the bottom's the boyfriend, and in the middle is her sister, Jacqueline. And Jacqueline, they say, is named after the sister in the middle. And as we get through this, you got to see they all have crazy backgrounds. And I don't think this girl ever stood a chance, to be honest with you. So that's the mother's Carla, the sister's Jacqueline, and the boyfriend. I have trouble saying his name, so let me just think it's Nanita, but let me make sure I'm getting the name right. So hold on, guys, bear with me, because I want to make sure I get his name right. So, because I have their charges, Jacqueline. Jonathan Nanita, but the Jonathan's Jonatan. All right, let me go ahead and show you this video. By the way, in some of the pictures, you see Jonathan is a little busted up. Not in that picture, but when he got arrested, that's because it was a bit of a high-speed chase, I'm hearing. And then when they caught him, he wrestled with the arresting authority, the police. All right, guys, let me go ahead and show you these two videos. So this is the first one, I believe. Yep. All right, bear with me.
Today, police confirmed many people's worst fears after a recent disturbing discovery in New Britain. Investigators say the human remains they found belonged to a girl and were uncovered in a large container in the backyard of an abandoned property.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that this would happen, like, here in New Britain.
A grandmother and her two grandsons stopped by to pray for a girl after police say her remains were discovered at this abandoned property in New Britain.
To see someone that young lose their life and wasn't able to have a life and, you know, to share joy and everything.
All day, people offered condolences and left behind balloons, candles, and flowers at a growing memorial on Clark Street. Today, police confirmed the human remains found in a large container in the backyard here on Wednesday were those of an adolescent girl. In a statement, they wrote in part, "Our police department has been working around the clock to piece together the information that has come forward to determine a timeline and an exact location of events leading up to our discovery earlier in the week. Investigators have not yet publicly identified the girl or her age and say more work is needed by the medical examiner's office. But they realize the community has so many questions surrounding the girl's death."
It's overwhelming, very overwhelming. It's a little kid. It's a little kid. You know, it's crazy, just crazy.
Our goal from the start of this was to bring justice for whoever murdered Jacqueline.
Today, investigators announced arrests in connection with the killing of 12-year-old Jacqueline Torres-Garcia. Officers say her decomposed remains were found in a plastic storage bin on an abandoned property on Clark Street in New Britain last week.
I want to thank the men and women that are standing behind me who have been working around the clock to get us to this point.
Now, officers say they have arrested the girl's mother, Carla Garcia, and charged her with murder. Also charged with murder is the mother's boyfriend, Jonathan Anita. Police are still looking for him. The mother's sister, Jacqueline Garcia, was also arrested on a child cruelty charge. Investigators revealed the girl, known to so many as Mimi, likely died about a year ago in the fall of 2024 while the family lived in Farmington.
Had there been any reports that she had been missing? Had anybody raised concerns, either from school districts or anybody, about where she had been for months?
To me, that was the most disturbing part, real quick. As I was doing my research, I had to keep on checking. When they said that when they discovered her, it looked like that she had been dead for about a year. I think the date of her death is being, some are noting as September 19th of 2024. I kept on checking to make sure that my date was correct, and it was correct. This was a body that was discovered over a year after she died. So that to me adds to the tragedy that's behind this story. Okay, let me keep it moving.
No.
Officers say it appears Jacqueline had been physically abused for a while and malnourished. They think her body was kept in the family's basement and then later moved when the family left Farmington in March this year.
This case is a deeply heartbreaking and disturbing case. No child should ever have to endure such suffering.
Get out of here. Get out of the world.
Today, emotions running high in a courtroom in Torrington as 3 people appeared on charges following the death of 12-year-old Jacqueline.
See, look at his face.
A relative telling us, quote, "On behalf of the family, let them all rot." Jacqueline's mother, Carla Garcia, faces various charges, including murder.
Given the facts and circumstances of the case, the nature of the charges, city is asking that bond remain as set at $5 million.
Also facing a murder count is the mother's boyfriend, Jonathan Anita.
She has a warrant outstanding out of New Britain Police Department.
The girl's aunt, Jacqueline Garcia, is charged with child cruelty. Today, New Britain schools confirmed the girl, known as Mimi, was enrolled there from kindergarten through 5th grade. But the district says in August last year, when Jacqueline was supposed to start 6th grade, the mother withdrew her, saying she was now living in Farmington, and filed a form to homeschool. Investigators say Jacqueline likely died last fall. Her body was kept in the family's basement and then moved earlier this year. After finding her remains in a storage bin last week in New Britain, police say evidence appears to show she was malnourished and physically abused. Her grandfather spoke to us soon after arrests were announced.
We want her like a daughter, you know? So that's why right now we got the heart broke, you know?
If you're here to learn what you don't know, yes? So I'm going to dial in right now and dive into some of the most common misconceptions.
It was just 8 months ago. We had another situation involving a Waterbury child who was homeschooled, who then dropped off the radar screen, only to be discovered allegedly locked up in a house for years. The New Britain School District was told Jacqueline Torres-Garcia would be homeschooled as well, leading to questions if this needs to be tracked better. The Connecticut Association of Superintendents of Public Schools, while complimenting parents who homeschool, also believes the laws need modifications, including annual check-ins by parents of homeschool children.
It is our responsibility, according to the state constitution, that says we must educate every child. They have a right to homeschool if they so choose. But I think we have a responsibility to ensure that every child is accounted for.
The Connecticut Homeschool Network said in June its members oppose requirements like that.
We don't utilize the public school system. Our system historically works. Homeschooling just works across the board. We don't need that oversight from a system that we're not part of.
And by the way, that's going to be part of this discussion about the oversight. And this is when you have a simple problem that becomes complex to solve, because we know the oversight is needed, just because you need that oversight for the children, so their parents are held accountable for that. So basically it's a good effort to make sure that the children are okay, because right now, if you don't have that oversight, there could be families that are abusive, neglect, whatever it is, that can hide their children in a system that the lady is recommending, the second lady, where there is no oversight. So that makes it harder for concerns to be discovered. So school is a big area that helps us address children that are being neglected, abused, etc. So when you eliminate that, then you also got to find a way to balance it. So if you want to have a homeschool, that's fine, but I'm okay with it still meeting these standards, so we can ensure, one, that the child's getting the education they're supposed to get, but two, that there's no concerns in the home. And I'm not against that. And again, this, you saw some of this in the Melody Buzzard case as well. All right, sorry about that.
The Connecticut Homeschool Network added it considers this an overreach, noting the failures have more to do with the Department of Children and Families not keeping tabs on its cases. Governor Lamont indicated he'd support more oversight.
Sometimes we, the state or DCF or the locals, lose contact with kids if they're not going to school every day. So we're trying to find better ways to just keep a track on those kids and make sure tragedies like this can be avoided.
Pass by. Lots of concerns and questions as people stop by the growing memorial for 12-year-old Jacqueline Torres-Garcia. Following the discovery of her remains, emotions seem to be rising from here at the site to court in Torrington yesterday.
Get out of here. Get out of the courtroom.
That's where three people charged in the case appeared: the girl's mother, the mother's boyfriend, and the girl's aunt, Jacqueline Garcia.
In regards to cases, she is currently on parole.
Garcia is facing charges, including child cruelty. It's not clear what led to her arrest, since the warrant is sealed for 2 weeks.
Judge, not a lot of money for gone.
Now we are learning more about the aunt's previous arrest in 2023. According to the arrest warrant, Garcia brought her then 11-month-old daughter to Connecticut Children's after reporting an issue with her leg. Officers report that a DCF worker told them the child was hurt and had multiple bruises and fractures on various body parts and at different stages of healing. Initially, detectives say Garcia reported the child had previously fallen, but investigators say there was no record of a pediatrician being contacted like Garcia claimed. In the warrant, detectives say Garcia told them she was also suffering from postpartum depression. Jacqueline commented that taking care of her 2 children is hard because victim's father is always working.
Imagine bringing your side project to life just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
I would have never thought from her personality that she was even capable of doing something so horrific.
Kimberly White says she lives a floor below Carla Garcia, the mother of 12-year-old Jacqueline Torres-Garcia. White says she met Garcia when she moved into the building in April. Soon after, their kids became playmates.
Her daughter, that is still currently alive, and my son were really good friends, like bread and butter. She was always trying to come over here. He was always trying to go upstairs.
She says she was friendly with Garcia, but the two didn't talk much. When human remains of a girl were discovered on Clark Street in New Britain last week, White says she heard Garcia could be involved. The two were talking about doing an episode on White's podcast when Garcia sent her a text message that NBC Connecticut obtained a copy of. It read in part, quote, "I didn't put my daughter in that container and throw her like she's a piece of trash. I am grieving." We then verified Garcia's phone number with a family member.
She didn't seem like a monster. She seemed like a high-spirited young lady. I'm 45. She's way younger than me. So I felt like the need mom mode kicked in, like, let me help you.
White says she saw Garcia on Sunday, a few hours before she was arrested. Garcia was charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder in the death of her 12-year-old daughter. Her boyfriend and sister were also charged in the case.
It's just disturbing. It's heartbreaking. So many words to describe what happened.
Family court documents indicate Jacqueline Mimi Garcia lived with her paternal grandmother, Patricia Delgado, from birth until she was 7 years old. At one point, Delgado even sued Mimi's mother, Carla Garcia, for child support. Carla Garcia, now a co-defendant in Mimi's murder, was awarded custody in 2022.
But DCF took her away from me. I felt they forced me to hand over the girl, and I went to court, and they told me that the grandmother no longer had any rights to take or even see the child.
The DCF, or Department of Children and Families, has not commented on what Delgado, the paternal grandmother, said. But
and that's what always gets me upset the most. When there were resources for you to give the child if you did not want the child. Because obviously you had grandma and grandpa that wanted the child, and yet you still chose to starve this child until the child died.
Agency has said it has been involved with Mimi's family in the past, and it's reviewing its records. Court records also show the girl's father, Victor Torres, took Garcia to court over joint custody in 2023. He wrote, "I want to see my children weekend like we agreed when given joint custody, or any day for that matter." Mimi's mother, Carla Garcia, sought sole custody of her in April 2024. Custody was granted to her months later, and soon after that, police believe Mimi was dead. The paternal grandparents told us Carla Garcia would not let them see or talk to the child.
So when the media got a hold of the search warrant, which was good, that's where all this information came out. So all this information came out, I want to say a few days ago. So now it's starting to get some national attention, as it should get some national attention. And by the way, the Child Protective Services, out of Connecticut, they did have some involvement. So it's not like they didn't do their job, but there was some dead time that they weren't as much involved as they should have been. And that was between the closing of an incident in 2022 and then maybe the end or the beginning of end of 2024, the beginning of 2025. So I have another video about DCF's involvement that I want to show you. And then I want to go ahead and go through what we have here just to get all the relevant information out there. I'll love your thoughts. Now, this video here, the next video is about 3 minutes, a lot less, but it's going to give you where I feel we're starting to see the trend. Again, it was introduced to me a little bit when we were doing Melody Buzzard. Let me show you a picture of Melody Buzzard, guys, because I keep on saying her name, but in case you don't check out the video, I just want to show you who she is. This young girl is still missing. And right now they're coming after the mom. They believe the mom knows where she is. They haven't made an arrest yet, but eventually they may legally demand the mother to show the child. I want to show you one more other thing, because if you look, they said this happened today. I think you guys may find interesting. Again, we're kind of off topic here, but for the Melody case, they believe that Child Protective Services was at the house. So there's a little video there, and you can probably see the lady coming out. They're going back to the car. So they're not giving up. They're checking. But they're very limited right now as to what they can do until they can get what they need to force her to produce her child. Kind of reminds me of the Vallow case. I'm not too familiar with the Vallow case, but I remember watching a movie about that, and it got to a point where they said, okay, you know what? Where's the children? Now we're forcing you to show us where the children are. I wish we could do it sooner, but right now we don't know where this child is. Melody Buzzard. Okay, so let me show you this second video. And this explains more of the DCF. All right, so hold on. Here we go.
Good evening. We do thank you for joining us here for the News at 5. I'm Keisha Grant.
And I'm Mike Heideck. We'll get to those stories in just a moment. But first, the Department of Children and Families is now explaining its involvement with a 12-year-old Jacqueline Torres-Garcia, whose remains were found in New Britain.
DCF has faced intense questioning since it was revealed the department had been involved with the family. NBC Connecticut's Matt Austin is joining us now in studio to break down this timeline that they're providing.
Yeah,
Matt.
so Keisha, Mike, a lot to walk through here. The Department of Children and Families thought its last time seeing Jacqueline Torres-Garcia was during a video call earlier this year, but police believe that was actually months after her death, and now there are questions about the identity of the girl who apparently posed as Jacqueline. Now, going back, the department says they were first involved with the family in January 2013.
And guys, we'll cover all this. I promise you. I got this broken down. So we'll cover everything that's discussed here in a bit more detail.
When Jacqueline was born and her mother, Carla Garcia, was in a detention center, Jacqueline was placed with her father's family, and that's where she remained until 2022. Family court documents indicate the girl, known as Mimi, lived with her grandmother, Patricia Delgado.
Only God is helping me. God is helping me to pass this process. I've been with her forever, and I'm always going to be here.
Now, in May of 2022, DCF says a superior court returned guardianship of Jacqueline back to her mother and father, including with support from DCF, the prior relatives, and the child's attorney. They also interacted with Jacqueline in September that year during an investigation involving her younger siblings. The department says the kids were enrolled in school and seen in the community during that time. DCF determined the children were safe. That case was later closed. In May of 2024, DCF says Jacqueline attended a medical appointment, and between November of 2022 and the fall of 2024, there had been no reports of child abuse or neglect with the family. Jacqueline's mother filed and was granted sole custody by the family court in June 2024, which DCF says it was not involved with. Police say the girl likely died in the fall of that year. Then months later, in January of 2025, DCF was investigating allegations concerning Jacqueline's younger sibling. In a statement, DCF wrote in part, Ms. Garcia stated at the time of our investigation that Jacqueline was being homeschooled and staying temporarily out of state with a relative. In response, DCF conducted a video call with a person who mother claimed to be Jacqueline, but again, police believe Jacqueline had been dead by then, so it's unclear who they actually spoke with. DCF says that information has been turned over to law enforcement and is still actively reviewing the situation, and lawmakers have concerns.
And I have a lot of questions about this, and I want to see my eyes on those reports, not a report about the report.
And today, state Democratic lawmakers have not gotten back to us, but previously the chairs of the Children's Committee had said DCF had, quote, failed the girl. We're told Jacqueline's siblings are now in state custody. And New Britain schools just provided these documents Jacqueline's mom filed in August 2024 to pull her daughter out of school and the plan to homeschool her. So lots of questions still, of course, about everything.
And there goes the homeschool control. I love your thoughts on that. So let's do that first. Do you think homeschool should have some level of oversight? I mean, serious oversight, only because cases like this can slip by you. A lot of people are saying that she fell through the cracks. But I just did a show yesterday on Melody Buzzard and saying now she fell through the cracks. So now we're starting to see this trend. So I put together something here. There's a bit of a timeline, guys. When I did my research on this, the timeline is tricky. So I tried my best to put it together. I think I'm pretty solid. I did see some older articles, and then I updated with some newer articles. But I think I got a lot here, and then we're also going to discuss DCF and then the homeschooling concern. We'll talk about the charges, a couple of things here. So on October 8, 2025, police in New Britain, Connecticut uncovered a horror behind an abandoned house. And that's the body of 11-year-old Jacqueline Mimi Torres-Garcia. She was in a large plastic bin. I think it was a red and white tote. Investigators have been tipped that Mimi's mother's boyfriend, Jonathan Nanita, drove a tote out of a cemetery and dumped it at a vacant Clark Street home. And we're going to break this timeline down. When officers opened the container on October 8th, they found Mimi's decomposed remains. By then, Mimi had been dead for well over a year. You know what's crazy is as you start doing these cases, you start to see connections. Like I see a connection with this and Melody, but now I'm starting to see a connection with this young girl and Celeste Rivas Hernandez, the D4VD case, David case, because of the way the body was handled once the death occurred. So I want to talk about discovery and concealment of the tote, because it was in a tote, a red and white tote. So the handling of Mimi's body after her death unfolded in several troubling stages, from concealment to transport to eventually abandonment. But the timeline is clouded by contradictions in official records and witness testimony. So I'm going to give you the timeline the way it first came my way. But at the end of the day, right now, the important thing is what happened on October 8th when the tote was discovered on 80 Clark Street at the abandoned apartment building or house, apartment building, I think. So after Mimi died in September of 2024, that's the reported date. Reported date of her death was September 19th of 2024. That's what's being passed around. So, but they do believe she died in September. The date, as I said, some people are saying September 19th. Her remains were first hidden in the basement of the family's Farmington home. The odor grew so overpowering that Carla Garcia admitted the family often left the house, staying in hotels or with friends. Now, by March of 2025, when they relocated back to New Britain, Mimi's body was moved with them. Mimi's body was moved with them, sealed inside a large red and white plastic tote. That tote stayed with the family for months. By summer of 2025, tenants living below the New Britain apartment noticed a strong stench. Believing it to be a dead animal, they did not realize the smell was coming from decomposing remains of that was in the tote above them. So, sorry, but let me read that again. Believing it to be a dead animal, they did not realize the smell was coming from the decomposing remains in the tote that was above them. The trail becomes less certain after that. According to search warrants on October 8, 2025, Jonathan Nanita was seen picking up a tote in the woods of a cemetery before driving it to a vacant home on Clark Street, where he left it behind the property. Yet a neighbor's account suggests something different. She reported seeing the same red and white tote sitting inside a parked car near 80 Clark Street for weeks leading up to October 8th. So I guess that's before the drop-off. But it doesn't really make sense. We don't know when it was picked up from the cemetery or when it was even dropped off at the cemetery. So I'm sure that's all going to come to light. Her dog consistently fixated on the container, and on the morning of October 8th, she said she watched Nanita and another man take the tote from the car and move it shortly before police arrived. This creates a timeline gap that has yet to be fully resolved. Was the tote hidden in a car by Clark Street for weeks? Did it ever actually sit in cemetery woods? Or does that reflect only the location from which police ultimately retrieved it? If you guys have clarity on that, hit me up in the comments. I'll save it, because I was trying, man. I was working on that. It's just a bit all over the place on that. But what's clear, here's what's clear, is that October 8th, acting on the cemetery tip, police found the tote behind the abandoned Clark Street house and discovered Mimi's remains inside. From Farmington basement to New Britain's apartment to possible storage in a car or cemetery, and finally to Clark Street. That's how I narrowed it down. The concealment trail illustrates both the family's desperate efforts to hide her death and the disturbing reality that her body went undetected for over a year. So, guys, when I was trying to figure out, I was blown away by the year. I thought that was, as I said, was misreported, but it wasn't. So then I tried to figure out how this timeline worked. But ultimately, one thing is it was discovered October 8th. And then just to, so from Farmington basement, so where they lived, to New Britain apartment, so it traveled with them, to possible storage in a car or cemetery, and finally on Clark Street. They took it with them. Timeline of abuse. So according to newly released search warrants, Mimi's final year was marked by escalating cruelty and neglect. Okay, guys, so bear with me. This isn't, this is tragic. This part is tragic. This isn't that easy to hear. So confinement in Farmington. So we're thinking around the fall of 2024, somewhere in September. Mimi was kept inside the Farmington home with her mother, Carla Garcia, and her boyfriend, Jonathan Anita. She had little or no outside contact. She tried to escape, tried to run away. I'm not even going to say run away for this. I'm going to say escape. On at least 2 occasions, Mimi tried to run away. Each time, according to warrant statements, she was found by family members and dragged back, only to be restrained with zip ties as punishment. These desperate efforts show she understood the danger she was in and was fighting to survive. Yet the warrants don't clarify how she got, how far she got, who specifically returned her, or why no authorities were alerted. Because that would be curious too. Whoever returned her, I'm curious to see if they have involvement or did they ask questions. I mean, I'm sure if she was trying to escape something, she would have spoke to them. So we really need to know who those people are and did they see any concerns? I mean, again, if the girl's run away, you asking her questions, what is she running away from? Were the authorities alerted? So, okay, so the warrants doesn't clarify how far she got, who specifically returned to her, why no authorities were alerted. The unanswered questions highlight just how close she may have come to rescue. That's what makes it even harder. The starvation as punishment. So by mid-September 2024, Carla and Nanita had stopped giving Mimi food altogether. Starvation became the ultimate discipline, a planned and prolonged form of torture rather than a sudden act of violence. And they say Carla, the mom, is saying that it's Jonathan Nanita who was pushing it. He was the one that was in control, but I don't care. You are the mother. You know, are you kidding me? You allowed it to happen. I don't know what's worse, him doing it or as a mother allowing it to happen. Now you got the aunt's awareness. So Mimi's aunt, Jacqueline Garcia, later admitted she witnessed the abuse firsthand. She described seeing Mimi restrained in a corner, bound in zip ties, forced to lie on pee pads, and denied food. She even photographed her niece in this condition and confessed that by mid-August, she knew Mimi was going to die. That awareness and her decision not to intervene makes her complicit in the suffering that followed. This girl never had a chance. All the people that were around her that could have protected her, they failed. You know, even if the boyfriend was the main person, what about the mother? The mother's sister? Who brought her back to the house? I'm really very interested on the runaway attempts, or I'm going to say the escape attempts, because that's not runaway, it's an escape attempt. How did she make it back in the home? Did she ever leave the home? That's interesting to me. So here are the verified details about Jacqueline Garcia, the aunt. I want to give you some details about her and her prior convictions, because they talked about that in one of the videos, because both the mother and her sister Jacqueline, so Carla and Jacqueline, have spent time in the justice system. So Jacqueline was arrested on June 27, 2023 for risk of injury to a minor. She pleaded guilty in September of 2024 to that charge. She was sentenced on December 4, 2024 to 10 years in prison, suspended after 18 months, followed by 5 years probation. She was released into transitional supervision in August of 2025 after serving approximately 8 months of that sentence. And that's when she was arrested again in the current charge. So her sentence was December 4, 2024. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison, suspended after 18 months, followed by 5 years probation. And all she had to do in prison was all she had to serve was 8 months of that sentence before she was released. So, and by the way, I believe, if I'm getting this correct, after she was arrested in June 2023 for risk of injury to a minor, she did plead guilty in September 2024. I got to double check, but I believe she was living. She wasn't locked up. I think she was living with them during that time. I'm almost positive. We may cover it as we go, but during that time, she was released. She wasn't doing her time in the jail. So from 2023 to September of 2024, she was on the streets, because that's the time when September 2024 was the time when Jacqueline Garcia was being tied with zip ties and starved. And remember, she even noted something in August or September, whatever it was, in September, that this girl's going to die. And she even had a picture of her. So she must have been home during this time, then got sentenced, then went to do her time, then came back out in August. That's when she came back out, August of 2025. And at that point, Jacqueline had already been dead for 11 months. Okay, so yeah, this timeline's tricky, but I think I'm correct on that. So circa 2020, 2021, I want to talk a little bit about Jonathan Nanita. He was then around 30 years old, around 2020, 2021. He's reported to have prior convictions for resisting arrest and first-degree reckless endangerment in New Britain. According to records, on February 16, 2020, he was involved in an incident where he nearly dragged a police officer. He was ultimately sentenced on January 27, 2023 to just 364 days in jail for those charges. So again, if he was given 365, he'd be in a prison. But no, he was given 364 days to serve in jail. Okay, so my records show he and Carla Garcia share 3 children together, ages 4, 3, and an infant born in January of the year of, I think this right now, 2025. Documents show Nanita owed more than $26,000 in child support. And that's for the couple's eldest daughter. Relationship context. Nanita and Garcia appear to have lived together in Farmington in 2024 and later returned to New Britain in March of 2025. At this point, guys, when they returned back to New Britain in 2025, they have the body with them, because she died in September 19th, when they lived in Farmington, because they put her in the basement. Let's see. So Farmington 2024 and later returned to New Britain in March of 2025, bringing Mimi's remains with them, according to police theory. And the warrants indicate that Nanita played an active role in the abuse and concealment of Mimi. The role in the abuse concealment. Okay, so warrants state that Nanita was the one who picked up a tote in the woods of a cemetery on October 8, 2025 and drove it to 80 Clark Street in New Britain, where Mimi's remains were discovered. He's also described as the primary instigator of punishments in the house. So zip ties, food deprivation, with Carla Garcia admitting many punishments were his idea. So guys, we're learning this together. So it's good. We're figuring out this case together. So arrest and charges. So on October 14th, and we're going to go specific on these charges. I got it, but just a quick little summary. On October 14, 2025, Nanita was charged with murder with special circumstances. That special circumstances matter because that adds to the highest level of severity for those charges. Sometimes you see those for death penalty states, because they can add that, and that could push something towards the death penalty. Conspiracy with special circumstances, risk of injury to a minor, first-degree unlawful restraint, and tampering with evidence. And his bond was set at $5 million. Probably going to repeat that later because I have the charges again. The special circumstances is going to be pretty much the torture. 2 weeks. that this girl probably starved to death. And I'm going to go over what starving does to the body. So the special circumstances, let's not lie. This beautiful 11-year-old girl, she was tortured. She was tortured as her body shut down. Her organs failed. This girl, she suffered. And that's the special circumstance. So the aftermath of the death, Carla later confessed that the odor from Mimi's body in the basement became unbearable, forcing the family to flee the home. When they eventually returned to New Britain in March of 2025, they carried Mimi's remains in a plastic tote, concealing her body until October when it was finally dumped and discovered. So here's the evidence of cruelty. So court filings and warrants paint a picture of prolonged torment. Mimi was bound with zip ties, forced to sit or lie on pee pads, and deprived of food. This was long-term torture, planned and deliberate. These caretakers believed they had total control. There was no remorse, whether for punishment or enjoyment. The cruelty was absolute, and in my mind, for rehabilitation for such individuals is impossible. Carla admitted most punishment, again, was directed by Nanita. I mean, guys, these are my notes, so sometimes I repeat things, but just bear with me because these are my notes. The warrants reveal how the family deceived child welfare officials during a DCF video call, and we're going to break that down later on as well. They had another child impersonate Mimi to convince investigators she was alive and being homeschooled out of state. And the investigators also uncovered that Carla had written notes on her phone about appearing on a podcast to share the story of what happened to Jacqueline. You saw that. That was the lady, Miss White. She told police she had been preparing to go on air before her arrest. Now, guys, to be honest with you, before I thought it was Miss White, I couldn't find out what podcast it was. I was looking it up. I took a little side note, but this may not apply to Miss White. But having said that, I put, what kind of mindset does it take to plan a podcast appearance while concealing your daughter's death? That's for Carla. It's chilling. It shows consciousness of guilt and a desire to control the narrative, to paint herself as a victim and protect her own image, even as Mimi lay dead. And that raises real questions. Should platforms allow such self-serving performance from abusers? The pursuit of clicks must never outweigh respect for victims. I don't think that's white. That was just a thought I had before I could figure out who was pushing for it. But the key here is that's the consciousness of guilt. So, I mean, what kind of mindset do you have to want to go on a podcast after all this? It's totally to create the narrative, to get the buy-in that you need, to get the public on your side, the public pressure with your created narrative that people think give you leverage. So the forensic findings, the medical examiner found no blunt force injuries or other wounds on Mimi's body, but it was severely malnourished. Investigators believe the constant starvation, not only single act of violence. Investigators believe that the constant starvation, not any single act of violence, led to her death because no obvious trauma was present. Police say this was a slow torture by neglect, not a sudden violent act. I want to talk about the custody and DCF background and oversight possible failures. This is another shifty timeline, so bear with me because I think I may work on this a few times because this was trying to figure this out was hard. So Carla Garcia's prior record. So 2013 detention at birth. So you guys, I don't know if that was mentioned, but Carla, the mom, was in prison or jail or in detention, whatever, when Mimi was born in 2013. So Carla was in custody and initial care went to relatives. So Mimi was not in Carla's care at the very beginning. 2018, there was another arrest. 2018, 2019. So 2018, there was the arrest for Carla again. And 2019 was the conviction. So on November 29, 2018, Carla was arrested in New Britain after police documented injuries on the victim, including a large red bruise on the side of the victim's face and another on the back of her head. On April 9, 2019, she was convicted of third-degree assault, and her sentence was 1 year in jail, suspended, and 2 years of probation. I think we're starting to see a trend here. Everybody gets suspended time. 2022, DCF involvement. In September of 2022, DCF opened a case regarding Mimi's siblings. It was closed in November for insufficient evidence. And that's where that you start to see, after that was closed, there's not as much involvement anymore, but there is going to be involvement from 2013 all the way up to 2022. And then after that, it closes off, and then you really don't see involvement again to like maybe the end of 2024, the beginning of 2025. In 2024, there's a custody shift. So by June 2024, Carla regained full custody. So this is by June of 2024. Carla regained full custody of Mimi and a sibling. That summer, she pulled Mimi out of school for homeschooling, cutting off outside oversight. They think they did that in August. So she had gotten sole custody in June, and they say by 2 or 3 months later, she pulled her out of school for homeschooling. And in context, I mean, this definitely could have been premeditated, because soon after that, in September, they started starving her. So remember, it's quiet with DCF at this point, but in January 2025, DCF received a complaint involving Mimi's sibling. The specifics were never disclosed. I couldn't get that. Carla told caseworkers Mimi was homeschooled and out of state, arranging a video call where another child posed as Mimi. The case was closed in March of 2025 with no additional concerns. In reality, Mimi had been dead for months already, because that was in January when they thought they had spoken to Mimi through Zoom. And by God, so right now is everything seems to be a video conference. I disagree with all that. Sometimes you got to get into the homes, but a home like this that has people with so many concerns connected to their background, you got to do the home visit. But again, that's just a thought, but I'm sure that's something they're looking at right now. This was the greatest failure from the courts to DCF to the school system. Every checkpoint failed here. Safeguards must be built so a child withdrawn from school is still physically seen and confirmed alive. And when institutions are misled but still miss obvious red flags, accountability must follow. Investigation for negligence, transparency, and public awareness are the bare minimum. So there's a few concerns there, but that's the debate you saw in the one video of the oversight when the child's homeschooled. I say, you know what? You want homeschool, you get the homeschooling, but you got to have some oversight, because it's not just about what curriculum you're trying to do, but it's more for the safety of the children. So it may not be your child, but someone's child's going to need that oversight. Some parents are going to need that level of accountability. I wanted to go back and get a little bit more detail with the DCF involvement from 2013 to 2022, because I thought it was rather confusing. So I wanted to see if I could break it down in more detail for you. So bear with me. This is what I found. According to DCF's own statement, their earliest contact with Mimi's family began at her birth in January of 2013. At that time, her mother, Carla Garcia, was in a detention facility, and Mimi was placed in the care of a potential relative under guardianship. DCF said Mimi remained with that guardian from 2013 until May of 2022. It makes me think, to be honest with you, it just me putting things together now, is she was with that guardian for quite some time, and I'm sure that she had an attachment to that guardian. And I wonder if that caused a conflict at home that could have become something frustrating for the mother to have to handle. And then this boyfriend getting involved, because maybe after growing up with the relative for so long, maybe the mother, maybe could have helped, but maybe should not have quickly uprooted this little girl from what she was comfortable with. So I wonder if that was a point of conflict there. The fact that this 11-year-old girl, at the time she would have been 9, wanted to be with the person who raised her. I mean, whatever. I mean, it's a question for thought. So during her time with the guardian, DCF provided sporadic services to the guardian household for Mimi and her younger siblings. From April of 2014 through June of 2016, DCF provided services, though details of the nature of support are not fully publicly described. Also, briefly in 2017 and 2021, following reports involving Mimi's younger sibling, DCF had involvement with that sibling family unit as well. So I just want to hold on. So during her time with the guardian, DCF provided sporadic services to the guardian's household for Mimi and her younger siblings. So they're helping the guardian. That's what they're doing. So they were involved in helping the guardian take care of Mimi and the sibling or siblings, younger sibling. So they're helping the guardian. In May of 2022, the parents, Carla Garcia and Mimi's father, Victor Torres, so they may have been together at the time, sought to regain guardianship of Mimi and her sibling. DCF supported the court decision, and after reviewing the family's history and assessing the parents' ability to care for the children at that time, guardianship was reinstated to the parents in May 2022. So I don't know if they went through this court to just make it official, or was there a fight here? Because again, that could be an issue. And then when they get the older, what do you call it? When you get Jacqueline home, maybe Jacqueline rather have wanted to be with the guardian, the one that raised her for most of that time. And what's your thoughts on that? I'm curious to see what you guys think. Should she go back with the mother full time after she's been with this guardian from 2013 to 2022? Would that be a hard adjustment for her? Could that be a part of the concern? Maybe. In September of 2022, DCF opened an investigation involving Mimi's younger sibling. So now, mind you, this is in September of 2022, after they had gotten the guardianship, because they got the guardianship in May. So soon after, she only had the kids, from what I'm reading, for 3 months. Now, that alone should be worth, hey, you just got the kids and we already have a concern. You just got the kids 3 months ago. In September, and then you got the background on top of that, guys. There's a background here that provides context. In September of 2022, DCF opened an investigation involving Mimi's younger sibling. The agency ordered screenings, contacted medical providers, and confirmed school enrollment. At that time, DCF found the children visible in the community, medically seen, and attending schools. Because DCF found insufficient evidence to substantiate child abuse and neglect, the case was closed 2 months later in November 2022. The agency offered screenings, contacted medical. Okay, I'm hoping they had some home visits in there too. Sorry, some of my mouth. After November of 2022, DCF says it had no further involvement with Mimi or her siblings until the complaint in January of 2025. That means that no oversight. Now, guys, with the history of the mom gone through the system, I mean, it doesn't hurt to have some level of oversight. Key takeaways. So DCF's interactions with the family was limited and periodic during 2013 and 2022 intervals, largely focused on the guardianship period and earlier sibling-related reports. So again, again, the first with the guardian was to help the guardian. Later on, when Carla when they got the guardianship, within 3 months, they were checking on concerns of neglect or possibly abuse. The longest continuous period without DCF involvement was from closing of November 2022 case until January of 2025, during which Mimi's mother withdrew her from school in August of 2024. And the abuse leading to Mimi's death is believed to have occurred. Now, mind you, guys, from November of 2022 to January of 2025, she died, we believe, September 19th of 2024. So January of 2025, when DCF did their video conference or whatever it was, that wasn't Jacqueline. That was someone playing the role of Jacqueline. So the agency's own summary acknowledges that despite this history, the abuse that caused Mimi's death appears to have gone undetected by DCF. I want to talk about the custody battles because during this time, I want people to realize that this girl was loved. Jacqueline was loved. So we talked about DCF. We talked about, we're going to talk about homeschooling too, because again, that comes up even with the Melody Buzzard case, but family was actively involved here. The father, the grandmother. So I think they knew something could have been wrong, especially the grandmother wanting the custody back or wanting the custody. I don't know if the grandma was the original guardian because it's not clear on that. But the grandmother, in this point with the lawsuit, which I'll mention, is Carla's mother. So that's Mimi's maternal grandmother. So sometimes you see the fight with the father side. No, this is Carla's mother. So Mimi's story was not just one of abuse hidden behind closed doors. It was also shaped by a series of custody battles and court decisions that ultimately left her in the hands of the very people accused of ending her life. So now you got some court decisions here. So court records show that Mimi's maternal grandmother, Patricia Delgado, filed a child support suit in 2016 and contested Carla Garcia's suitability for custody. So I think that while Carla was still locked up, she was trying to get full custody of the baby, because maybe she was concerned that, could be wrong, but maybe she was concerned that if Carla was to get back out, Carla would probably want full custody of the child. Despite Delgado's effort, Carla Garcia was awarded custody in 2022. Yeah, pretty much what it is, because she knew that the mother would probably have a strong claim to the child. And that's the funny thing, though, too. It's not always, they say it's always what's best for the child, with this definition that they got to go to the mother. That's what, universally best. It's not always. It's not always. So, just the default of always giving it to the mother, it's not. Especially when you got a grandmother saying, hey, I want the child, because she knows. Despite Delgado's effort, Carla Garcia was awarded custody in 2022. Later in July of 2023, Mimi's father, Victor Torres, filed for joint legal custody and weekend visits. He wrote to the court, I want to see my children on weekends, like agreed, when given joint custody, or any other day for that matter. And in June of 2024, a judge granted Carla Garcia sole custody of Mimi and her sister. And guys, June 24th, then around August, she's pulled out of school that year. And around mid-September, we think September 19th, she died. She was murdered. So the decision is now one of the most heavily scrutinized pieces of Mimi's timeline. Advocates and relatives say that by granting sole custody to Carla, the court cut off other relatives, like the grandmother who originally fought for Mimi's protection and removed an external safety net. Once Carla withdrew Mimi from school that summer under the guise of homeschooling, Mimi was completely isolated from outside oversight. It was done. It was done. What emerges is a devastating picture. A grandmother who sought to protect Mimi, a father attempting to maintain connection, but a court system that ultimately returned custody to Carla, probably under the guise that it's the mother, but no other justification but the fact that it's the mother. A mother with a violent history, an abusive partner, and in hindsight, that June 2024 custody ruling may have sealed Mimi's fate, may have sealed her fate. So again, with just some of the systemic failures. So these systemic failures have led to public outrage. Thousands have signed petitions demanding Mimi's law, a measure requiring more rigorous welfare checks for homeschooled children. That's what it's pushing right now. Lawmakers have pressed for greater transparency from DCF, accountability in how welfare checks are handled, and tighter regulations on homeschooling. Advocates point to specifically the January of 2025 DCF case, where a complaint led to a sham welfare check that closed while Mimi was already gone. She already had died. That lapse now stands as the clearest example of how children can be erased in silence when systems rely on surface-level checks instead of in-person confirmation, because, again, that was a video, and it turned out it wasn't her. Someone was playing the role of her. So balance and responsibility. So DCF and the school, because that seems to be where there's a contention there. I mean, where do you guys think is the greatest contention, the greatest concerns? So when we examine how Jacqueline Mimi Torres-Garcia slipped through the cracks, two institutions stand out: the Department of Children and Families, DCF, and the school system. Each bear responsibility to safeguard her, and both failed in critical ways. DCF responsibility. DCF had a long history with the Garcia family from Mimi's birth in 2013 through custody transfers and sibling investigations. The agency knew this was a high-risk household. This January 2025 complaint, when a caseworker accepted a video call showing another child in Mimi's place, has become the most glaring failure. DCF was deceived, yes, but critics argue that such deception is exactly what welfare agencies are meant to guard against. Surface-level checks conducted virtually allow Carla Garcia's lies to erase a child who's already dead. The school responsibility. Schools are often the frontline defense against abuse. We talked about that. Teachers and administrators notice absences, changes in behavior, and warning signs that no agency worker can catch in a once-a-year visit. By withdrawing Mimi in the summer of 2004 under the claim of homeschooling, Carla effectively cut off that last line of defense. Connecticut's limited oversight of homeschooling left the school powerless to verify her well-being in that sense. The law itself tied the school's hands. Once a parent files homeschooling paperwork, follow-up is minimal. That's why you saw the lady saying we want to be more involved. The balance. So where does responsibility fall? On DCF for failing to probe more deeply and closing a case that demanded more scrutiny. On the school system for lacking the legal authority to ensure Mimi was still safe after her sudden withdrawal. And on the state itself for maintaining laws that allow children to disappear into isolation with little accountability. If Mimi's law is to have any real impact, it must bridge these gaps, giving schools a mechanism to raise flags when a child vanishes from the classroom and giving DCF the mandate to investigate until they see a child with their own eyes. Now, earlier I said that Mimi, Jacqueline, was tortured, or she was starved. So what does starvation look like for a 11-year-old? I did my research on that. I'm not the expert, so get your medical comment. Eventually, when I get more subscribers, I can get more qualified experts, but this is what I got. So people often ask how a child can die from 2 weeks of not eating. In fact, that today, the body's energy crisis sets in within days. Without food, the body first burns stored sugars and liver glycogen for about a day. By 48 hours, these reserves are gone and the body shifts to fat and muscle breakdown. Within the first few days, blood sugar is maintained by converting muscle protein into energy. And after about a week, the body enters full ketosis. It burns fat stores. It burns fat stores and slowly spares muscles. In practice, these changes manifest quickly in a child. Day 1 to 3, Mimi would have felt dizzy, irritable, and extremely hungry. Her muscles and organs began to consume themselves for fuel. Day 4 to 7, the body's metabolism slowed. Mimi's heart rate and blood pressure would drop. She'd be weak, pale, and possibly fainting from hypoglycemia, and her immune system weakened, making even a mild illness dangerous. And by week 2, with no stored fat left, severe muscle wasting would have set in. Young children could lose up to 10 to 20% of body weight in a week of starvation. Mimi's tiny body would have been unable to regulate temperature or heart rhythm properly. She likely developed electrolyte imbalances and organ strain. That's from my research. Medical sources note that humans typically cannot survive more than 2 to 3 months without food, but that's with water. However, that estimate assumes a healthy adult with body fat. Children die much sooner. After 2 full weeks of complete starvation, an 11-year-old would be on the brink of multi-organ failure, and Mimi's case fits this pattern. She showed no external wounds, but had literally starved to death. So I want to talk about the charges because they were charged on October 14th. So the aftermath. As of this writing, Mimi's death has become a rallying cry in Connecticut. Candlelight vigils were held near the New Britain site, and a small memorial of flowers and candles remain at 80 Clark Street. The October 14th charges. So on October 14, 2025, the investigation reached a critical moment when all 3 adults tied to Jacqueline Mimi Torres-Garcia abuse and death were formally charged in the New Britain Superior Court. The mother, Carla Garcia, prosecutors charged her with murder with special circumstances, conspiracy to commit murder, first-degree kidnapping, first-degree assault, risk of injury to a child, and tampering with evidence. The special circumstances designation makes this one of the gravest charges under Connecticut law, reserved for particularly heinous acts, and exposes her to the state's harshest penalties, because we all know this little girl was tortured by these 3. Jonathan and Anita, mother's boyfriend. Anita was charged with murder with special circumstances, conspiracy to commit murder. They got him as the lead here, by the way. She's saying that he's the one that led what was happening, but no, you both held accountable, including your sister as well, who knew and did nothing. So conspiracy to commit murder, risk of injury to a minor, unlawful restraint, and tampering with evidence. Warrants describe him as the driving force behind the most extreme punishment, with Carla admitting many of the punishments were his idea, and Jacqueline Garcia, Mimi's aunt. The aunt faced a different but still damning set of charges: intentional cruelty to persons, first-degree unlawful restraint, and risk of injury to a minor. Police records show she not only witnessed Mimi's confinement and starvation, but even photographed her niece tied up on the floor. In interviews, Jacqueline admitted that by mid-August 2024, she knew Mimi was going to die, yet she did not intervene. The October 14th arraignment solidified what many in the community already feared, that this was not a single parent acting in isolation, but rather a collective crime carried out with cruelty and silence by multiple adults in Mimi's orbit. Each now faces the weight of the justice system, with prosecutors signaling they will pursue maximum penalties. So for Carla Garcia, the mother, bond was set at $5 million. Jonathan Anita, mother's boyfriend, bond was set at $5 million. Jacqueline Garcia's aunt, bond was set at $1 million. Meanwhile, child welfare agencies are under the microscope. DCF officials admit failures in judgment and are reviewing how Mimi's disappearance was handled. In her own statement, Mayor Erin Stewart lamented that no one reported her missing. State leaders have called for full transparency on the home check and for reforms to prevent another tragedy like this. They're looking at the reports. I want to talk about one more thing. Kidnapping, the tying with the zip ties, the starvation. It's about control and power. And I wanted to put that in there. And I think it goes with the narrative that I think this girl wanted to go back to her original guardian or the person that was raising her, or maybe her grandmother. So the evidence suggests that this was about control, dominance, and cruelty. Carla and Jonathan didn't just neglect Mimi. They created an environment where punishment meant starvation, zip ties, and humiliation. That goes beyond poor parenting. It's intentional torture. Psychologists often note that when caregivers see a child as defiant or disobedient, abusers may escalate until they break the child's will. Mimi's repeated attempt to run away shows she wasn't resisting, and they responded by tightening control. That's worth repeating. I'm going to repeat that. Psychologists often note that when caregivers see a child as defiant or disobedient, abusers may escalate until they break the child's will. Mimi's repeated attempts to run away show she was resisting, and they responded by tightening control. And I want to talk about this dysfunctional alliance, all three of this. I'm asking you guys, did she stand a chance with those three? Any one of those three, you think that girl stood a chance with? Then you put all three together? One of the disturbing aspects here is the alliance between Carla and Anita. Carla admitted many of the punishments were Anita's idea, yet she enabled and carried them out. This kind of dynamic where a parent aligns with a partner against their own child can create a closed circle of abuse. It also meant that Mimi had no protector inside her own home. Mimi had no protector inside her own home. The aunt Jacqueline knew what was happening. She photographed Mimi, restrained, and admitted she knew the child would die, but didn't act. That silence, whether out of fear, complicity, or self-preservation, makes her culpable too. It shows how cruelty can normalize inside a family system until no one steps in. Can you imagine them all hanging out at the house? Just having a good time, doing whatever they do, watch TV, play cards, whatever it is, while this girl is dying. And it's normal, another day for them. And then when she finally dies, oh, it's expected, and then he's moving around with her body. Could you imagine being in the house in that moment? Girl's crying for help probably, and no one's protecting her. Carla's background shows instability and violence long before Mimi's death. She was convicted of assault in 2019. Now, this is Carla. Mimi was born while, let's do this again. Carla's background showed instability and violence long before Mimi's death. We kind of discussed this, but just to revisit. She was convicted of assault in 2019. That's the big one. Mimi was born while Carla was incarcerated. Custody battles with relatives and the father show that there were longstanding concerns about her parenting, and yet the court still awarded Carla sole custody in 2024 that gave her unchecked power. Hey guys, just to reiterate that time frame, it really is. Carla Garcia was locked up in 2013. Yes, Connecticut DCF says that when Jacqueline Mimi was born in 2013, kind of following DCF records here though. Jacqueline Mimi was born in 2013. Carla was in a detention center. The baby was placed with a relative and stayed here until 2022. When was Carla released? I don't have that. Public reports don't give a release date from that 2013 detention. What's documented is that Mimi remained with the relative until May of 2022, when a court granted guardianship or custody back to the parent with DCF support. So the timeline from the 2019 assault is to the custody battle is September 6, 2018 to April 9th of 2019, Carla assaults a woman. She's convicted of third-degree assault on April 9th and receives a suspended sentence of 2 years probation. And then in 2016, at that time, the grandmother was also. So that may have been when she could have been released, because that's when the grandmother is fighting. So maybe she got released sometime around there and then got rearrested. In May of 2022, court returns custody, guardianship of Mimi and a sibling to the parent. DCF supports the decision. And then you see the investigation for the sibling. They closed that case in 2022. Then the father fights for custody around July of 2023. And then she gets sole legal custody in June of 2024. Again, guys, we're learning it as we go. It's interesting though. So again, we got that. Why didn't they stop? What's chilling is that there's no sign of remorse. Carla even prepared to go on a podcast to explain herself, as she believed that she could justify her choices. That shows consciousness of guilt, but also a manipulative mindset. She wanted to control the narrative even after Mimi's death. The bigger picture, ultimately, this wasn't a family protecting or raising a child. It was a family unit twisted around secrecy, cruelty, and lies. And while we may never fully understand the psychology that let them watch a little girl starve, we can say this: they acted out of power and control. They silenced a child's desperate attempt to escape, and their silence and inaction reveal a level of evil where rehabilitation seems impossible. And guys, as we do these shows, we find gaps. So this is interesting, because maybe we could put effort to work on these gaps. Look for that petition. So this is a closing thought. Jacqueline Mimi Torres-Garcia's case is harrowing precisely because it exposes so many missed signals. Withdrawn student, a secret move, a welfare check video call with an imposter, and neighbors disturbed by a smell. The search warrants revealed Mimi's starvation, the aunt's incriminating photo, the family's concealment efforts, and even Carla's plans to go on a podcast to justify her daughter's death. Now, how many other children might be hidden in plain sight right now? The concern is systemic, not isolated. Justice for Mimi cannot mean punishment alone. It must also mean prevention, building safeguards that ensure no other child is erased in silence. Accountability and healing comes first. Rehabilitation is secondary when such cruelty is deliberate. True justice honored Mimi's memory by protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Guys, there was a lot there. I hopefully was able to bring some clarity to it. I put a lot together. I was doing it and trying to go back and forth, trying to figure out how this all connects. That's kind of how my mind works. But I think it gives us a very strong foundation to go ahead and begin whatever arguments we need to make sure we could do what we can for Mimi's law. And guys, understand in this case, if you guys get a chance, please check out the video I did yesterday on Melody Buzzard, because we may have similar circumstances here. So got a trend maybe, right? 2 is a good pattern. So as always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. Stay safe.